Okay, we're live. So, as I said earlier, we're going to recap a little bit of what we did last time since we haven't met in over a week. And this lecture today, what I'd like to get through, I guess it would be the third and the fourth, possibly the fifth speech if we have time in Plato's Symposium. So remember, um, you know, on the face of it, the subject of the dialogue is love, or in Greek, the term is eros. And you know, I'm going to go ahead. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to erase these first two names because we talked a little bit about Aristodemus is apparently the man who uh, was at this party and it was able to tell his story to Apollodorus, and Apollodorus is apparently the one who is telling it to us or telling it to some stranger. But when we get to the speeches, all these speeches at the dinner party here, this drinking party, um, these speeches are in praise of love, and we start with Phaedrus and move on to Pausanias, and these are the two that we've already covered. Okay, so I'm going to review them briefly, but we won't spend much time on them today. Now, we're going to try to get through Eryximachus, Aristophanes, and possibly, again, we'll see how much time allows. Possibly we'll get through Agathon. And then we'll be ready next meeting on Thursday at 1 p.m. For those of you who can make it, great. At 1 p.m. on Thursday, I will be finishing up the first 5 speeches and getting into Socrates. And that might be pretty close to the end. It's going to take me maybe another meeting and a half maybe to get through the symposium, maybe 2 more class meetings or 2 more lectures, right? So probably a week from today, we'll be wrapping up Plato's Symposium. And at the end of the week, next week, we'll be getting started finally on Descartes. So if you don't have this book or you haven't found a copy, another different version is fine, of this essay, you need to get a hold of it by next end of the week next week. So we'll get started on it by then. All right. So, but again, the game plan for today, a quick recap of the first 2 speeches, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty, the new stuff, right? Eryximachus, Aristophanes, and Agathon. Dakota is asking in the comments, did I assign an essay? It showed up on my Blackboard. Yes, it was assigned a while ago. It's in the Plato folder. It's been up there for a couple of weeks. For some reason, I don't know. I probably should have just nixed out the assignments tab on Blackboard because that confuses a lot of people. I don't use the assignments tab. Just go to the Plato folder and scroll down, and you'll see a bunch of topics, and you'll see the place where you actually turn it in. But yeah, it's again, it's due end of the week this week. I might push it back further. It really depends on how long it takes us to get through all of these speeches, at least the first 5. But I'm going to keep it at, this Sunday, which, let me see, that's the 28th. I get the last day of this month, right? So it needs to be turned in by then. I might give you a couple more days if it takes us longer to get through this material. But okay, so let me go ahead and just really quickly recap Phaedrus and Pausanias, and then we'll pick up where we left off so long ago. It seems like forever ago. I'm having trouble locating my copy of Plato's Symposium. It's hiding on my desk somewhere. Sorry, hold on a second. I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, now we're back on. So we talked about Phaedrus. Remember, he's the rhetorician, and he starts with this, the speech that praises love as the, he says it's the most ancient of gods. And, he uses an appeal to authority to establish this claim of his, right? It's the most ancient because all the poets and the philosophers, they all write about it as if it were at the beginning of all time. But that's not really, I think, essential to his speech. Really, I think the main point of Phaedrus's speech is that love is so great because it gives us a certain moral guidance. The way he puts it, it gives us a sense of shame when we do something shameful, and a sense of pride at doing something good. We want to be a very good and noble and virtuous person before our lover, and so our lover will approve of us. And he says that nothing does this more than love, not family or honor. Those might be motivations for being a good person, but love is the one that is the most deep and the most effective at doing this. You know, a lover will do anything for his lover and be brave and cunning. And I guess some of the objections that we talked about, we brought up last week, or week before last, where, you know, heck, does this really true? Does love always sort of provide us with moral guidance? You know, can't we fall in love with somebody and it actually makes us worse? That we actually you know, might lead us to do something evil. It depends on who we fall in love with, and it depends on, you know, how we you know, maybe our own sort of idea of what is good or virtuous. And so we saw all sorts of problems with this, and so I won't get into them. We'll move on. You can rewatch the lecture from, I guess it's like 2 weeks ago now, you know, to sort of recap. But after Pausanias, after Phaedrus, we get to Pausanias. We get to Agathon's lover, basically. We don't know much about this person. There was a guy named Pausanias about 200 years later who's like a famous, I think he was a historian, but this is not the same guy. This is just some groupie or whatever, I guess, of Agathon. He's much younger, apparently. You might say, and this is an argument or an interpretation that many have had about this dialogue, is that each of these speeches gets a little better and closer to the truth. I find this a fairly compelling argument, or fairly compelling way to read it. I do have my reservations about it. We'll talk about that, I guess, once we're done, once we get through all of them and we're looking at the reading as a whole. But what does Pausanias do? I think in a way he does improve upon the previous speech. So remember, Phaedrus's speech is basically, love is good because it makes us good people. It makes us feel inspired to do good deeds, to be honorable, so that our lover, the person that we're in love with, will notice us and be attracted to that, I suppose. So that's what it does. But Pausanias, he talks about how there are two different species of love, because Eros, the god, Eros, Cupid, is sort of the Roman equivalent, is always paired with Aphrodite. And because there are two Aphrodites, there's a more ancient Aphrodite, referred to as the heavenly Aphrodite here, and there's the common Aphrodite, the one that we're probably most familiar with. If you know any Greek mythology and you've seen paintings of Aphrodite, this is the one that we think of, you know, the beautiful woman rising from the ocean. She's a sort of a symbol of this seductive, she's a seductress. You know, she draws you in and makes you do all sorts of crazy things. So if we keep this in mind, says Pausanias, that Eros is always paired with one of the other Aphrodites, we will see that there are two loves. There's a common love and a heavenly love. And basically the difference is what you might expect. The common love is more like lust. It's more like just sexual desire, and with no real care for the person's well-being that we love. Whereas the heavenly love, we care more about their soul and their character than we do about maybe their body so much. And we want them to be good and be well off for a long time. Whereas the common love doesn't really care about that. They just want to get busy and move on to the next conquest. And they're not really that picky about what. So you could argue this is a bit of an improvement on the previous speech. You know, maybe love does inspire us to do good things, but only if it's the heavenly kind, right? Only if it's the the associated with the higher being, Aphrodite. All right, so that's the story so far. Where are we going next? Let's go ahead and look at our list. So we've done Phaedrus and Pausanias. Today we're going to jump into what I find to be probably the most obscure and difficult of the speeches is the Eryximachus speech. He's the physician. And then we're going to move on to Aristophanes, who wrote comedies. He's a poet, and so is Agathon, but Agathon wrote tragedies. So let's look at what Eryximachus has to say about Eros, and let's see if this is any bit of an improvement on Pausanias' speech. Having trouble finding it. It's page 20 if you have the same edition as I put on the syllabus, but if you have a different version, it's around line 186a. He begins basically by kind of building on the previous speech, and so it's not that he completely starts over. He kind of builds upon what Pausanias says about a heavenly and a common love. But he couches it more in medical terms because he's a physician, I suppose. So let's actually get a slide started for our friend Eryximachus. Okay, so he's the remember let's keep in mind that he's the physician. I don't know if that helps. It might make it, I don't know, it might help a little bit. As I said, I think his speech, it's very there's a lot of analogy, there's a lot of metaphor, and so I think that makes it very difficult to get at the underlying meaning of what he's saying. And also, you're going to see once I get through some of these passages, he really broadens the scope of what we think of by eros, by love in the erotic sense. This drive to be near with somebody in a physical, very visceral way, to be just drawn towards them. What is this feeling? What is this force? What is eros? He broadens it pretty wide. Obviously, he's going to apply some observations from medicine, from his craft, from his occupation. But you're going to see in a moment, once I get through some of these passages, he broadens it even further. So he says, I'm starting right from the beginning here on page 20, again, 186a. Pausanias introduced a crucial consideration in his speech, though in my opinion, he did not develop it sufficiently. Let me therefore try to carry his argument to its logical conclusion. His distinction between the two species of love seems to me very useful indeed. But if I have learned a single lesson from my own field, the science of medicine, it is that love does not occur only in the human soul. It is not simply the attraction we feel toward human beauty. It is a significantly broader phenomenon. So as I said, he's going to broaden this to not just like, okay, well, we think about love, erotic love. It's like we're thinking about our first crush, or like the person we have a crush on now, or people that we know who are in love. But he's going to say it's a much broader phenomenon. It certainly occurs within the animal kingdom and even in the world of plants. In fact, it occurs everywhere in the universe. So it's a universal force, Eros is. Love is a deity of the greatest importance. He directs everything that occurs. So all that happens is directed by this force of love, of Eros. This erotic love, not the phileo, like the brotherly, friendly love, not the sort of agape love, the sort of charitable, just open arm love to your fellow man. but a very personal, deep, like this visceral feeling that you get when you see somebody that you're very attracted to. It directs everything that occurs, not only in the human domain, but also in that of the gods. Even the gods, these Greek gods are guided in their actions by Eros. Let me begin with some remarks concerning medicine. I hope you will forgive my giving pride of place to my own profession. The point is that our very bodies manifest two species of love. Okay, so he's on board with this common versus heavenly, but he's going to put a more medical spin on it. He's going to talk more about a sort of I guess, a healthy versus an unhealthy kind of love. In fact, let me go ahead and I'm going to type that here in the slide. A healthy versus a unhealthy. I'm having trouble spelling healthy today for some reason. A healthy versus an unhealthy love. And let's see, and this is the part that for me I have problems with. I don't think he does a very good job of explaining the difference. I think that Pausanias is a bit better about this. When Pausanias tells us, okay, there's a common love and there's a heavenly love, he gives us a description, which I think makes it pretty obvious what he's talking about. Whereas I think with Eryximachus, it's not quite obvious. The reading doesn't really give you an obvious clue. It kind of stays in the realm of metaphor, at least to me. I've got a few guesses of what I think he might be saying here, but it's certainly open to debate. And if you have anything that you might, if anybody wants to jump in and offer their own interpretation, I'd definitely be happy to hear that. But he says that basically consider the difference between healthy and diseased constitutions. Okay, you know what? Let's just to stick with the same terminology that we have in our translation here. I'll put diseased love. So there's a healthy love and there's a diseased love. That sounds cooler. Sounds more sinister than unhealthy. Diseased love. That sounds like maybe a good name for a band or something. Love manifested in health is fundamentally distinct from love manifested in disease. Oh, I skipped a passage. He says that dissimilar subjects desire and love objects that are therefore themselves dissimilar. Okay, so he seems to be saying that opposites attract. I don't know if that really is going to help much. So maybe if you're diseased, you like healthy stuff. If you're healthy, you like this. Okay, well, I guess if you're unhealthy, you want to be healthy. But if you're healthy, don't you want to stay healthy? Maybe I should stop with this because this is something that Socrates brings up later. We're not going to get to that. Definitely not going to get to that today. But he says, so again, there's a difference between healthy and diseased constitutions. He means constitution in the sense of your own constitution, not like the constitution of a country or a nation or a city, but like, what you're made of, right? What a person is made of, what you're constituted of. So he says there are healthy and diseased constitutions, there's healthy diseased love, and the fact that the similar subject desire and love objects themselves are similar. Therefore, love manifested in health is fundamentally distinct from love manifested in disease. And now recall that as Pausanias claimed, it is honorable to yield to a good man, as it is shameful to consort with the debauched. And I don't really think Pausanias quite said that. All that Pausanias said was that, nothing is good or bad in itself. It all depends on how it's done, right? Don't do it too much or too little or whatever. Actually, that was Phaedrus, wasn't it? But I don't remember Pausanias saying anything about that. Shameful to consort with the debauched. I don't remember him saying that, but he does talk about, it's good for a young man to have a lover because he wants to do good things. But certainly he should have said this, and it's good that Eryximachus is saying this. Um, my point is that the case of the human body is strictly parallel. Everything sound and healthy in the body must be encouraged and gratified, and that is precisely the object of medicine. Conversely, whatever is unhealthy and unsound must be frustrated and rebuffed. That's what it is to be an expert in medicine. And perhaps, and I don't know if this is going to be that helpful, but I need to probably pause here for a moment before I read this next passage. Just a couple remarks about Greek medicine, ancient Greek medicine. From what we can tell, the way that medicine was approached back in ancient Greece was quite experimental. And there was this assumption that basically medicine was a matter of balancing these different elements in the body. And so every human body, for instance, was made up of certain elements. Some of these elements were dry, some of these elements were wet, some of these elements were hot, and some of the elements were cold, and so on and so forth. So there were all these opposite elements that mixed together to make our body. And there was this wide assumption, it seems, from what we can tell, amongst physicians, amongst doctors, so-called doctors, that if you were unhealthy, that it was a matter of imbalance of these elements. And so these elements needed to be somehow balanced. You had too much wetness or too much hotness or too much dryness, too much coldness, whatever it was. You had a fever, you're obviously too hot, you need some coldness inserted into you, like drink some water or whatever, right? Like this was, some of y'all might be laughing hearing this, right? But you got to imagine they didn't have a whole lot of technology. They didn't have a lot of previous experience experimenting with people to see what worked. There was no theory of cells and things like that at this point amongst physicians. And so this next passage he's going to talk about, and this is what and I don't know if that's going to be helpful. My little digression there explaining ancient Greek medicine, or really just ancient medicine in general. This wasn't just a Greek thing. This was kind of typical of most physicians in the ancient world. But this might be helpful to understand the next passage I'm about to read. How this applies to human relationships, that's what I have problems with. I'm going to read this passage and kind of give you my interpretation, but if you want to jump in, maybe you have even a better idea what the heck he might be talking about. So yeah, and Lola, she says in the comments, love is the balance and harmony between good and bad love. Well, I don't know if I like that definition because you're using, so love is a balance between good and bad love. So, but what's the difference between good and bad love, and how does that work in like a human relationship? You mean like, so maybe you need a little bit of the common love that Pausanias was talking about, and also a little bit of the heavenly. So, maybe you do have to be physical and the lust is a part of it. Would you also have to have care about their soul as well? I don't know. Maybe that's what you're getting at. That might be what he's saying. I tend to think that maybe, perhaps, he could be talking about how two different people complement one another, how opposites attract. You might be familiar with that saying that opposites attract. That a good lover is somebody who fills in the gaps that you lack. If you're too hot, then you need somebody who's more chill, who's more cool in personality or temperament, right? But I'm sorry, I gave you my interpretation before I even read the passage, but let me read it briefly here. I'm not going to read the whole thing. He says, in short, medicine is a science of effects of love on repletion and depletion of the body, and the hallmark of an accomplished physician is his ability to distinguish the love that is noble from the love that is ugly and disgraceful. A good practitioner knows how to affect the body and how to transform its desires. He can implant the proper species of love when it is absent and eliminate the other sort whenever it occurs. Excuse me. The physician's task is to effect a reconciliation and establish mutual love between the most basic bodily elements. Which are those elements? They are, of course, those that are most opposed to one another, as hot as to cold, bitter to sweet, wet to dry, in cases like those. In fact, our ancestor Asclepius is like the god of medicine. He was credited with inventing medicine. Um, he first established medicine as a profession when he learned how to produce concord and love between such opposites. And that is what those poet fellows say, and this time I concur with them. So again, I think that, so he's saying Eros, it's a force of nature. So I guess we're most familiar with it when we fall in love with somebody. But since he's a physician, he sees it in human bodies, in our biology. And so there are these elements in our bodies that have to come to a reconciliation and have to be repleted, increased, or depleted, and come to this equilibrium, this sort of yin yang, right? This sort of balance. That's what I see. I think what he's saying, that how does this apply to human love? To me, I'm just taking it as opposites attract. I don't know, like somebody, because again, he starts off by saying that dissimilar subjects desire and love objects that are themselves dissimilar, which we're going to see when we get to Aristophanes if we have time. Well, yeah, he's next, so we should have time to get to that for sure. Aristophanes seems to say the opposite, that when our lover is somebody who is, I guess he completes us, or he or she, our lover, will make us complete, but that's because we're like two peas in a pod. We're each other's half. Whereas Eryximachus seems to be, he seems to be implying that that lovers have this sort of, they're opposites, but they balance each other out. There's a sort of balance. So I mean, balance versus imbalance, maybe that's one way to look at healthy versus diseased love. And we're talking about elements here, and he lists some elements: hot, cold, all this sort of stuff, which, if you're a chemist, or you're like a scientifically minded person, you wouldn't really call those elements per se. Okay, so I'm using that term element in a very loose sense here. But right, wetness, dryness, and things like that. So for him, a healthy love is a balanced, and all these opposite elements are balanced, whereas a diseased love, maybe there's too much hotness, too much cool, too whatever, that brings about something wrong, or something unhealthy, at least something diseased. Okay, so he says medicine is guided everywhere by the god of love, by Eros, and so are physical education and farming. Okay, see, I told you, right? He's going to broaden this even further. So it's not only this spark of attraction and desire that we feel towards another person who we're in love with. It's a force that guides medicine, right? He's trying to make our bodily elements find a balance of love and harmony. But farming and physical education. Then he says, on a moment's reflection, it suffices to show that the case of poetry and music, too, is precisely the same. Poetry, creating things, art, works of art, music, these are guided by love. And he says, indeed, this may just have been what Heraclitus had in mind, though his mode of expression certainly leaves much to be desired with itself. Sorry. Heraclitus must have had this in mind, although his mode of expression leaves much to be desired. he says that the one, all that is, the universe, the one, being at variance with itself, is in agreement with itself, like the attunement of a bow or a lyre. A lyre is a musical instrument. It's a stringed instrument. A bow, bow and arrow. This needs a bit of explaining too. I guess I should pause here for a moment and talk at least a little bit about Heraclitus. So Heraclitus is a pre-Socratic philosopher. I guess I should write that as well, right? He's pre-Socrates, right? He's old school. I think 7th or 8th century BC, and he's a very mysterious, enigmatic thinker. He left a series of sayings, these little fragments, very pithy saying. One of the things that he's famous for saying is that you never step in the same river twice. Why? What do you mean you never step in the same river twice? Are you kidding? I've been to the Guadalupe River like dozens of times. When I used to live in Austin, we'd go there, every week during the summer to go tubing. But is it the same river, right? It's constantly flowing. The water that constitutes what it is constantly being replaced. So Heraclitus thought that the universe was like the river. The universe, the one, universe, the one, was always changing, just like a river is always changing and flowing. But it wasn't completely chaotic, because like the river, there was a tension. A river flows a certain direction because there's a certain tension between the banks, right? The river banks. Each edge, each rough, hard edge makes the water flow in a certain direction. It's constantly flowing, but there's always this sort of tension that keeps it sort of together. And so it seems like Eryximachus is drawing from this view of the universe of Heraclitus and making this point about love, that you've got this universe of yin and yang and strife and tension, but yet also flow and flux and always, chaos. And this sort of balances out, right? The one, the universe, being at variance with itself, just like the river is at variance with itself. It has these two opposing riverbanks. It still, as he puts it, is in agreement with itself. It has a flow. It has a certain logos is the word that Heraclitus used. There was a certain logos to the universe, a way of being, a flow, a pattern. The word logos has a lot of different connotations in the Greek. We're actually going to come back to that term logos when we wrap up Plato. It means something a little different, I think, for Plato. For Heraclitus, it's just the way things are. There's a logos to the universe. If you've read your New Testament, the Gospel according to John, it starts off with this word. In the beginning was the logos, and in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And it's literally the Greek word for word. But again, it has other connotations: pattern, plan, account, explanation, all these sort of things. Biology, right? The word psychology, that comes from the Greek logos, right? Psychology, psyche, the mind, the soul, the self. Logos, an account of. Okay. But for Heraclitus, again, the universe had a certain flow or logos to it, but it wasn't absolutely chaotic. Even though it was constantly flowing and in flux and in fluctuation, that was part of the logos, was that it was always moving and shifting. It still had a certain order to it because it was held together by strife and tension. Again, to me, this lends itself to a kind of yin-yang reading of Eryximachus. If anyone in here is familiar with, Taoism, I should italicize that, the, ancient Chinese philosophy of Taoism. Sometimes it's spelled with a T. Um, the notion of the yin and the yang, right? There's the yin, which is supposed to be the male. No, actually, the yin is the female. Which is the dark, feminine, the passive, whereas the yang or yang is the bright, the masculine, the assertive, and the universe is a sort of the Tao itself, the Tao, the way, the flow of the universe is held together by these two complementary yet opposing elements. And so this is kind of how I'm reading into Eryximachus, but I mean, he's not very clear. This is obviously, there's a lot of metaphor. This is very mysterious. It's very poetic for a physician, I would have to say, right? This speech is very poetic. It's kind of beautiful, I would say, but still very difficult to get at clearly in any sense what he might precisely be talking about. I think Pausanias is a bit better explaining his distinction between the heavenly and the common love. So he says, I'm gonna actually let me skip a lot of this because he gets into music. He talks about discordance in music, um, and there's a lot of like musical terminology here. Discordant elements in music. What? Well, maybe somebody knows. Anybody in here like a musician? Anybody got a background in music? Can you tell me what discordance is? No, or you're being shy. So discordance in music, it's when you basically have, um, well, if two notes are in attunement, right? If they're in harmony, okay, they sound good together. So if you go to a piano and you play two keys, just pick two random keys on the piano, and they sound really good together. They're in harmony, you could say. Okay, there's a lot of mathematics behind this. We're not going to get into, and you can even get to physics and frequency of different musical notes. Um, but if they don't sound good together, if they're a bit off, then they're inharmonious and they're discordant, you can say. Okay, why would you put discordant elements in music? Why would you do that? Why would a composer intentionally, because they do this, especially in more modern music, what would the point be of dissonance or discordance in music? Any guesses? It's going to make you feel uneasy and tense. Why would anybody want to feel uneasy and tense? Maybe it's exciting. Why would anybody want to go see a horror movie? It's a scary movie, right? Why do you want to be scared? Well, I suppose in music, typically the argument is made that when you're learning musical composition in a kind of traditional setting, that you use discordance as it's an element of excitement. It's a nice element. It adds variety to your compositions, but it's also good because there's always resolution. You have these notes that are played and they kind of don't fit together, and it kind of makes the listener kind of feel uneasy, but then it's resolved in a note or a chord, a key or a chord that is harmonious, and there's this sort of release of tension. And so, he's making this, he's drawing this distinction or this parallel in musical composition, that not only is eros something that guides the physician, he's got to balance all these opposing elements, but even people that compose music, they have to work with discordant notes and resolve them in harmonious resolutions. I'm going to skip quite a bit of the next few paragraphs. In fact, let's jump ahead to page 23, where he talks about, Well, actually, no. Let's read, because remember he said that it applies to farming. So where does he get that? Let's look at the bottom of page 22. It's line 188a. Um, a little bit above that final paragraph on the bottom. He says, in music, therefore, as well as in medicine and in all other domains, in matters divine as well as in human affairs, we must attend with the greatest possible care to these two species of love, which are indeed to be found everywhere. When the elements to which I have referred, hot and cold, wet and dry, are animated by the proper species of love, they are in harmony with one another. Their mixture is temperate, and so is the climate. Harvests are plentiful. Men and all other living things are in good health. No harm can come to them. But when the sort of love that is crude and impulsive controls the seasons, he brings death and destruction. He spreads the plague and many other diseases among plants and animals. He causes frost and hail and blights. All these are the effects of the immodest and disordered species of love on the movements of the stars and the seasons of the year. That is, on the objects studied by the science called astronomy. So even the planets, the stars, they're guided by this. The seasons, whenever it's too, like whenever love is diseased, that's when you get winter, I suppose, and fall. And then the springtime is like the good, that's when love is balanced. All this talk of balance, even though he mentioned Heraclitus, it reminds me a little bit about it makes me think a little bit about what I think it was Phaedrus who talks about how love is neither good. Actually, it's Pausanias. I was right at the beginning of class. I was kind of hesitant. It is Pausanias that says nothing is good in and of itself. Drinking, dancing, talking. It's how it's done that makes it good or bad. If it's done well, if it's done nobly, then it's good. If it's done excessive. And I mentioned, when we talked about Pausanias, I mentioned the principle of moderation, the principle of the golden mean, which you find talked about quite a bit in Aristotle's philosophy, but it was a principle that all things, really, any actions are kind of okay. Even sex. Sex was not shunned. It wasn't, like they didn't live in a puritanical society. But on the other hand, you didn't want to take it to excess. You didn't want to be like just guided by sex all the time. Yeah, have sex, have fun, but don't be a nymphomaniac or whatever, right? A sort of balance. And perhaps this is what's going on in Eryximachus' speech as well. He's also guided a bit, just like Pausanias was, by this principle of moderation. But again, I think there's also this really big focus on a balancing of elements, of opposite elements. And there's a couple ways, more than a couple ways, you can interpret this. The way I'm kind of reading it is maybe in a human context, it's again, two lovers are not, they're not carbon copies of one another. They're actually different people, and that's good. That your lover is someone who makes you a better person because maybe you're not as outgoing as they are, and so they make you meet more people, and you're open to more experiences because of them. And they need more quiet time. Maybe they're too of an extrovert, and they need to go read a book every once in a while and be more reflective. So perhaps this is the reading that I always sort of lean towards. Um, but when he gets into medicine, he talks about like elements within one person's body. So I'm wondering if maybe what Lola was saying earlier, this harmony between good and bad love. I don't know exactly if I had your, what you, the gist of what you mean by that correct, but maybe the way I take that is that maybe it's okay to have a little bit of the naughty stuff. You can have a little bit of the unhealthy love, but don't let it overpower the healthy. I don't know. It seems like he wants to completely eradicate the unhealthy. That the best thing to do is to be guided always by the healthy love, and to avoid and to kind of push down and clamp down on the unhealthy kind. but maybe also too, it seems like it's inevitable if it's in the seasons, the stars, it's all guided by this. Maybe it's inevitable that we go through these unhealthy winter periods where things die and are decrepit, and frost and hail and blights, as he puts it. I want to try to move on because we're almost out of time, and I've spent almost all class on one speech, but there's a couple more points I want to make. On page 23, now we're finally there, he mentions how love, eros, also guides religion, or what he calls the rites, rites, not right, right? Not like civil rights, but rites as in rituals or worship, the religious worship, rites in that sense. That religious worship, religious piety is guided by this same force, by eros. He says, consider further the rites of sacrifice and the whole area with which the art of divination is concerned. That is the interaction between gods and men. Here, too, love is the central concern. Our attempt to try to maintain the proper kind of love and to attempt to cure the kind that is diseased. For what is the origin of all impiety? It is our refusal to gratify the orderly kind of love and our deference to the other sort, when we should have been guided by the former sort of love in every action in connection with our parents, living or dead, and with the gods. The task of divination is to keep watch over these two species of love and to doctor them as necessary. Divination, therefore, is the practice that produces loving affection between gods and men, and is simply the science of the effects of love on justice and piety. And, I think that this makes a lot of sense in the context of the Greek religion, what we now call the pagan religion, the Greek paganism. But you could even apply it, I think, to modern religions like Christianity and Hindu and Islam and all this, right? That especially with Islam, I mean, to be Muslim literally means to submit to God, to be someone who submits to God. And so it's a sort of, you as a practicing Muslim, when you're praying, is you're sort of showing your gratitude and your devotion and your love for God. But obviously the Greeks had a much more I don't know what the right word is. I was going to say transactional, but I don't even know if that's quite. But they would appease the gods with sacrifices, like literal sacrifices. They would, burn an animal carcass to Zeus. Here's my best lamb, Zeus. To sort of, be good, to sort of balance the relationship between the immortal gods and the mortal human beings. I skipped. There was one passage I meant to read that I skipped. Now I'm having trouble finding it. There's a passage where basically Eryximachus makes the claim that all the greatest poetry is inspired by love. And so like all the greatest songs, all the greatest music, all the greatest art that was ever written, this was inspired by Eros. And so love is a great poet. Oh, you know what? I'm wrong. That's not Eryximachus who says that. Now I'm really rusty. If I take 2 weeks off, man, I completely lose my game. I feel like I'm totally like I keep slipping today. I keep making mistakes. Yeah, it is Agathon who says that God is a great poet. So we'll wait to talk about that. I have my reservations about that. Okay, good. We're done with Eryximachus then. I thought that we had one more thing to say about him, but I think we've kind of summed it up. And again, I open the floor to anybody who wants to jump in with their own reading of Eryximachus, if you have one. This is the best I can do, right? Love is this force of nature. It's not just in humans, it's throughout all plants, animals. It guides musicians and poets and farmers, and astronomers and physicians. What we know about is love, again, healthy and diseased love in humans, I don't know, right? Is a disease love fatal attraction? Is disease love where you got two personalities that are both hot and so they like make each other even worse? He's not very clear about that. Maybe, and I've had some students suggest this interpretation, that he doesn't really add anything to Pausanias. He just agrees. And so when he says healthy love and disease love, he's talking about the same thing Pausanias is talking about. All he does is he broadens the scope. He says, yeah, Pausanias is right, but it doesn't just apply to humans. So Pausanias is right. Healthy love is caring about a person's soul, caring about their well-being, caring about their character, wanting to guide them and make them a better person. Whereas, diseased love is where you're just horny, right? You're just a pervert, right? Like all you care about is having sex. And so I think that would be a fair interpretation for sure. Maybe I'm over analyzing things here, but there sure is a lot to unpack in this speech. So I do find it poetic. It's kind of a beautiful speech. Now we get to finally what is arguably the most entertaining, the funniest, although some commentators will say it's actually not funny, it's actually tragic. But some would say this is the most entertaining, the funniest speech of the dialogue. And I have to kind of put my cards on the table here. Aristophanes' speech is like my least favorite one. I mean, not that I don't like reading it. I kind of agree with the commentators that it is tragic, it's fun, it's funny, there's a lot to say about it. But I have my issues with the underlying philosophy that is guiding it. And one thing you can say about Aristophanes' speech is that it's pretty clear what he means by eros and what he's getting at. Whereas Eryximachus, it's up to you, right? Your guess is as good as mine. But what is he basically saying? He bases his account of eros on mythology, which is that's interesting. He's not the first to do this in the dialogue. I mean, but I think he's the first to do it in a much more in-depth manner, because he gives us a fable. He tells us a story about how love came to be amongst human beings, why we feel love between people. And so again, he kind of brings it back down to earth as well. After Eryximachus broadening it to the cosmos and everything that is, the planets moving and the crops failing or growing, Aristophanes brings it more to a human level, brings it back to a human level. But what is this story that he tells us? What is this myth? He tells us a myth about the origin of love, why humans love each other, why we feel compelled to follow each other. Does anybody get this far in the reading? Maybe it's been a long week for you as well, and you read this so long ago that you don't remember. Well, we're almost out of time, so I don't think we're going to have enough time to get through Aristophanes today, but I'd like to at least get started on it. So it doesn't seem like anybody wants to participate, so I guess I'll tell you the myth, okay? And there's a lot more details to it if you want to actually, do the reading. But basically, Aristophanes says that once upon a time, long, long time ago, at the very beginning, human nature was a little different. Human beings were not physically the same as we are now. Originally, every one of us was attached to another person. And so physically attached, like, Siamese twin type thing. So we all were born this way. All of us had two heads, 4 arms, 4 legs, and apparently we were like really cool. We were awesome. We would do these crazy cartwheels and spin around and jump all over the place, and we were quite happy. But we got very, I guess, overconfident and arrogant in our happy state. And so, as human beings, we decided we wanted to conquer the gods. And we started to cartwheel up Mount Olympus to get Zeus and get all the Olympian gods. But the gods were like, we ain't having that. So Zeus was about to kill us, but then he said, I don't want to do that, because if I kill them, then nobody will worship us. Nobody will offer us sacrifices, and that will be boring. We don't want to live in a universe without people to worship us. So instead of destroying human beings, Zeus cut us in half and separated us. So originally, we were either a double, 2 guys put together, 1 man and 1 female put together, or 2 women put together. But now we've been separated, and basically, when we fall in love with somebody, when we find somebody that we love, the reason that we love them, the reason that we feel this eros, this attraction, being drawn towards them, is because they are our other half. They are our missing half. Okay? So we are somehow born now incomplete and unhappy. And love is basically finding the other half, right? The better half. Right? So I call this the soulmate theory. Some of my students in the past have protested against this soulmate description, because I guess Aristophanes never uses the term soulmate. I don't think the term soulmate even existed back when this was written. So, I mean, maybe it's not fair for me to use that term, but I think this is what he's talking about. When modern people talk about finding their soulmate, I just haven't found my soulmate. Where's my soulmate? We're soulmates, this sort of thing. This is what they have in mind. They have this sort of metaphysics. They have this sort of idea of love that Aristophanes is trying to propound here. So anyway, I feel like I have my speaker turned all the way off today, or you guys are being like exceptionally quiet. I don't know what the deal is, but I just feel like there should be way more to say about this than is being said. But anyways, I'll proceed. What issue do I have with this theory, right? As I said, I'm not a big fan of this theory, the soulmate theory. I don't want to jump in and totally tear it apart just yet. What is good about it? Is there anything good about it? This is on page 27. I'm going to read, kind of his explanation. It's line number 191D, about 3 lines below. He says, each of us then is a matching half of a human whole, because each was sliced like a flatfish, 2 out of 1, and each of us is always seeking the half that matches him. Okay. And I'm going to skip quite a lot of bit of that. He mentions that some seek men, some seek women. It depends on what you were originally. On page 28, line 192C, couple lines above that. He says, so when a person meets the half that it is his very own, whatever his orientation, whether it's to young men or not, then something wonderful happens. The two are struck from their senses by love, by a sense of belonging to one another, and by desire. And they don't want to be separated from one another, not even for a moment. Now, I mean, in a certain sense, I don't want to, like I said, I put my cards on the table. I don't like this theory, don't like the soulmate theory, have a lot of issues with it. But I have a little bit of sympathy. I mean, there's something about it that I think points to something real. Maybe someone can speak to this. I'm having trouble getting people to speak to anything today. Either that or I got my thing on mute. I don't know. If you're trying to talk and I can't hear you, please type something in the chat box. Say, hey, I'm trying to talk and you can't hear me. But yeah, this is like deathly quiet. But what he just said there, there's something to that, right? Maybe you've had this experience yourself. I'm sure some of you have had this experience where you meet somebody and you just like them. You don't know why. Like, you're freaking attracted. Like, you want to be with them. You want to date them. You want them to be your boyfriend, your girlfriend, or whatever, right? Yeah, and it's just instant. I mean, I don't want to say love at first sight, but like love at first meeting, you know? And it's something like, yeah, they're attractive, they're cute, but she's cute too, and I'm not quite as drawn to her. I want that one. You know, like, I don't know what it is. She's the one. I don't know. There is this there's something to that. I think that people, I mean, I've experienced it.
I agree. I've experienced, it's funny because I'm experiencing that now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I told the guy that he's the only one I want. He was like, well, how do you know that? And I'm just like, dude, I don't know how to explain it, but I know what I want. I mean, all the times that I've been in relationships, I mean, at this point, you're right. It's a feeling. It's a strong feeling, and you're so sure about it.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I'm happy for you. I haven't had that feeling in, heck, I can't remember like the last time I felt that way. It's probably been like at least 10 years. But like,
thank you.
So I'm kind of envious. But that's nice. I'm glad you found. But to me, to try to be a jerk about it. Sorry. That could be dopamine, right? Like they what do they call it? It's called I think that there's like the term in psychology or sociology. They call it the honeymoon phase. I don't even know.
Yeah, the honeymoon phase. Yeah, I want to say I agree, but however, it's been 2 years, so I feel like at this point, that honeymoon phase been over. So
okay, well, yeah, good. Okay, yeah. Well, then it's definitely not that. Yeah. See, I don't think I've ever. Well, you know, I take that back, but I was so young. I remember like when I was first in love, you know, this girl I was with, like off and on, we were off and on together for 5 or 6 years. And yeah, like there'd be times when I'd be like so sick of it and we break up or whatever. But like I remember like 4 or 5 years into it being like, yeah, like I'm really into her. Like she's the one. But I was so young, you know. I mean, looking back, I mean, again, I mean, it happened a few years ago, but I think it was the honeymoon effect. It was the sort of like, I just haven't been that excited about somebody in a while. Maybe.
Yeah, what you're saying is normal, and that's true, because I'm a psychology major, and I went over that, the honeymoon phase.
Right, like
you're right.
They've done studies on this, right? It's like usually between 30 to 90 days, you know, you got this initial spike of dopamine. And once that sort of wears off, it's like that kind of tells you whether it's true or not. And apparently, obviously with you, 2 years, I'd say it's a pretty safe bet, you know? But I feel like too, though, and I don't think this is definitely probably not the case it sounds like in your position, but this is kind of my beef with the soulmate theory is I think some people kind of trick themselves into believing this stuff, you know, and they make up this sort of ideal picture in their mind of who their perfect soulmate will be, and it almost like limits them. You know, they kind of close themselves off from any other possibility, and
which is why most of those people don't end up with nobody,
right?
Because their theory is unrealistic.
And a lot of times it's something that like they get it, and like, or if they did get it, like they probably would realize how stupid it was to like. I mean, I'm trying to think of a good example of this, but like I don't know. I guess I've probably dated way too many people, so it's like I kind of feel like I have a pretty good idea of what I like, what I don't like. But I have friends who are just, they, especially I hate to pick on the ladies, but it's like all these female friends, they have like this laundry list of stuff, like he's got to be 6 feet tall. He has to live inside the loop. He has to have this certain type of a job. He has to like this certain type of a music. He has to like not have kids, which I guess I can understand because I mean, some with kids, that's a lot, like you're taking on not just them, you're taking on like a whole family. So I mean, I can get that, but like some of this stuff, it's like real superficial, and a lot of it's like, you might get somebody who checks all those boxes and then you still not really happy. It's there's something more to it than that. What that is, I don't know, but I think you got to get to know somebody a little bit more before it's absolutely real. But there's something to this that, there's some like je ne sais quoi about attraction, and it goes the other way. I was about to say this earlier, where I guess I kind of just said it about some of my friends. This has happened to me where I'll meet someone who I feel like I should be attracted to them, but I'm not. Like I'll meet somebody and I'm like, man, she's good looking, she's smart, she's fun. But I just don't feel it. I just don't feel it. I don't know why. I should, but I just don't. I'm just not feeling it. Yeah, Melon says there's no spark, but what does that even mean? Again, there might be. To me, I'm guessing. I'm guessing it's biological. I tend to be, I'm all Mr. Science. I try to explain everything with science. I'm pretty much illiterate when it comes to science, but I'm so amazed and impressed by it that I tend to, look at biological explanations, and it seems like the biologists, this is still complicated, right? They're still doing research on a lot of this stuff, and some of it's hard to do research on. But I've heard things like that. There are you can kind of smell, whether somebody is genetically right for you. Like if they're too similar genetically in the genetic pool, that's why they say like, women can be, men and women can be attracted by pheromones, right? Like, people will give off a certain odor, and it might not even be something that you could even tell. Like you're not even aware that you're able to smell it. It's imperceptible to your nose, but it's enough to where, they do these experiments where they have these women sniffing, they had women sniffing a bunch of like t-shirts that their boyfriend had worn or that someone that they dated had worn, and like tested whether or not like their dopamine level went up or whatever, right? And they were saying this, that the hypothesis, again, a lot of this stuff's still experimental, they haven't proved it. The hypothesis is that your body is like is kind of signaling to you not to procreate with this person, basically. It's like, even though they're objectively look attractive, they're objectively smart and compatible with you, there's just, as Madeline puts it, there's no spark. And the reason there's no spark is just your biology is just telling you, don't breed with this person, right? They're good, they're fun, you can be their friend, but they're not, compatible with you genetically or something like that. I don't know. I always thought that's an interesting theory. Of course, there needs to be a lot more research done on that, but that's one going hypothesis. Is like, why are we just inexplicably drawn towards some people and then we're not towards others, even though some people might be the same resume, same on paper, same relative attractiveness level, but you want this one. I think some of it, though, and this is where we're going to get to this next time. We're almost out of time, so I'm going to stop it here. But one of my big beefs with the whole soulmate theory is, and I think it was it Kia who was saying this, or no, Kaya, I think is how you say your name. Sorry, I think Kaya was saying this is like, I think we fall in love with an idea. Was it Ray? Was it Raven, whoever. Somebody said it earlier. We fall in love with an idea. We fall in love with, this concept, not an actual person, right? And I think this is the big trap that Aristophanes' theory sets us up for. And also the fact that there's only one person in the entire universe that's compatible with you, that's kind of crazy. And that could lead to, like, what if you get it wrong? What if you get somebody, you're like, this is my soulmate, and like Fatal Attraction or something like that, and and what's the likelihood that you're going to meet that person on a planet with 6 billion human beings? What's the likelihood that you're going to meet the human being that's the right person for you? That seems like finding a needle in a haystack. Now, I think Aristophanes says something later on, like, if you're good, the gods will guide you towards your lover, if you're good and virtuous or something like that. But still, sounds like wishful thinking to me. Anyway, we've only got 1 minute left, so I better stop the lecture there. We've got one more speech to go. I'm gonna start next class on Thursday, the 1 p.m. Section. I'll start class with Agathon. Well, we'll probably recap the story so far, as we usually do. So I'll do a quick recap of all the speeches so far, but we'll mainly focus on finishing up Aristophanes and getting into Agathon. And probably, I'm guessing, because Agathon's speech doesn't take that long to get through, once we finish Agathon, we'll probably have at least a good 20 or 30 minutes to get into Socrates' section, where he starts to bring up his view on Eros and love. So anyway, I'm going to hit stop on the recording.